With One for All, Deku went from being a quirkless loser to one of the greatest heroes of all time. Not having a superpower turned out to be a blessing for him. But I have to wonder, what would have happened if Deku actually had a quirk of his own? First off, what kind of quirk would it be? Most characters end up with a fusion of their parents' quirks, so we'll go with that. Deku's mom, Inko, has an emitter-type quirk that lets her telekinetically move objects. That might not sound very powerful, but it is important to remember that Inko is a civilian. Her quirk was never properly trained, and overtly using it is illegal. A quirk like this, being brought up to hero level, would be amazing. In fact, we kind of already know what that would look like thanks to Reiko Yanagi and her quirk, Poltergeist. With it, Reiko is able to control objects and swarm her targets with them, but her limit is about the weight of one person. We still don't know much at all about Deku's dad Hisashi, but thankfully, Horikoshi let us know that the not-so-local milkman can breathe fire. And I know that sounds a bit underwhelming since the Todoroki family is right there, but hear me out. Endeavor and his freakish genes are one thing, but we can't pretend characters like Burnin don't exist. Her quirk, blazing hair, gives her access to an inexhaustible flame on her head that can be freely controlled. With it, she can launch projectiles, create swords, and even fly. She also doesn't seem to have an overheating problem. And based on how she fared against Dabi's Blue Inferno, it looks like she has a solid level of heat resistance too. Endeavor's Hellflame quirk is amazing, but it is not the only direction a fire-based quirk can take to be great. After throwing his parents' two quirks in a blender, we end up with Deku's original quirk, what I would like to call Dragon Fire. Pyrokinesis, with the source of the flames being his mouth. Like Kosei Subaraba from Class 1B, Deku's quirk factor would be his lungs. Mimicking a dragon, he would be able to inhale and exhale flames, which he would then be able to control at will, shifting them into different shapes and sizes to suit his needs. Quirks are all given pretty simple names, and I think Dragon Fire fits really well here. Deku would pretty much be like Natsu from Fairy Tail. And with a quirk like this, his life would be totally different. Instead of wondering if he could be a hero, there would be no doubt in his mind. He wouldn't have grown up being timid or bullied, and his poor mother wouldn't have put on weight from the guilt. There's also the fact that quirks tend to have an impact on the personalities of their users. I'd expect Deku's to be a more fiery version of All Might's. They wouldn't be as close, so Deku would mostly be mimicking how the symbol of peace presented himself to the masses. The enthusiasm and excitement Deku tends to have for heroics would be his default. He'd kind of be like Rengoku from Demon Slayer, which is fitting since I'm sure a lot of his training would include breathing exercises. In this timeline, Deku and Bakugo would have been great friends and very heated rivals. Instead of growing up with an inflated ego, thanks to having such an exceptional quirk, Bakugo would have been humbled by Deku's comparable one. The desire to be better than one another would spur them both on. Bakugo's quirk development has always been advanced compared to that of his peers. He already had plenty of special moves before some of them made any at all. Actually having some serious competition from the very beginning would have pushed him even further. There is no doubt in my mind that Bakugo would have been a lot stronger a lot sooner. Probably not to the point of a quirk awakening, since those tend to be from life or death situations, but when it comes to battle IQ, super moves, and the limitations of his body, he would be way better. Just a single mock battle against Deku early in the school year was able to teach Bakugo so much. Imagine what years of that would have been able to do for both of them. These are two heroes who refuse to stay down, no matter what sort of punishment their bodies receive. They would be even more durable if they were accustomed to battle damage before going to UA. Deku's obsession with heroes began even before he reached the expected age of quirk emergence, so he would still be a total fanboy and study a bunch of heroes. But in this case, it would all be done with emulation in mind. For example, after seeing Mount Lady in action, maybe he would try and make a giant fire fist. After seeing Kamui Woods in action, maybe he would try to make his fire branch out like a tree. Learning how to better manipulate and shape his flames would be a big deal. With a quirk this capable, Deku would have passed the UA entrance exams with flying colors. Those giant robots would have been melted, giving him a ton of villain points. And knowing Deku, there is no way that he wouldn't have racked up a bunch of rescue points too. Kirishima wasn't that impressive back then, but even he was able to come in second place with 39 villain points and 35 rescue points for a total of 74. So Deku with Dragon Fire should have no trouble beating Bakugo's 77 points for a record-setting first place finish. Once he makes it to UA, new personality aside, Deku's relationship with the other students would not be too different. To them, Deku always had a quirk. He would most likely still be interested in the quirks of his classmates, but his appreciation levels would not be as high. He would probably hang out with Bakugo and Kirishima a bit more than Ida and Uraraka. Deku's hero costume would have to be totally different, Sadly, his mom would not be the one to make his first costume since he would burn right through it. It would need to be made fireproof by a professional company. It might even be a bit militant like his buddy Bakugo's. I imagine the mask could be inspired by the shark mouth decal you would see on an attack plane. If he still goes through the whole knockoff All Might Rabbit thing, he would pretty much be like Score Bunny from Pokemon. As for his hero name, Deku wouldn't really fit since he would have never been picked on. Instead, we'll go with Napalm, but to avoid confusion, we'll keep calling him Deku for the video. The first battle trial between Deku and Bakugo would be epic. It would set the stage for the two prodigies to stand out in comparison to their peers, at least in terms of raw power. Deku would be trying to catch up to the quirk comfort ability that everyone else was able to forge over the course of their entire lives, so he would be a lot more developed early on. During the USJ incident, being sent to the water zone would have been really bad for him. Depending on his new friends might be the best way for him to handle this. And once he's out of the water, he'd be able to retaliate against any pursuing villains. Alternatively, this could force Deku so far out of his comfort zone that he would need to take his power to a whole new level. As crazy as it may sound, it is totally possible for fire to be underwater. The only thing you need to make a fire are oxygen, heat, and fuel. Using his quirk under these conditions would cost Deku what little air he has. But if he's skilled enough, it could help him make it to the surface. From there, none of the students were ready for prime time against Inomu back then, so he'd still sit on the bench with the others while All Might dropped his infinite combo. When the time comes for the UA Sports Festival, if Deku's not a dummy and doesn't fall for Shinso's mind control, his fight against Shoto would be even more exciting to see. No more holding back due to hurting himself. He would force Shoto to go really hard on the ice. Normally, the icy hot hero would suffer negative effects from too much cold, but Deku's flames would keep him heated enough to ignore that issue. In fact, Shoto might even have a sort of immediate resentment towards Deku as a fire user. Proud of his own fire quirk, Deku would still urge Shoto to make his flames his own. Although Deku would be able to manipulate Shoto's flames, Todoroki could still overwhelm him with too much fire to handle. It would be a battle of abundance versus control. Regardless of who would end up winning, being friends and rivals with Bakugo and Shoto would do wonders for Deku's quirk development. And despite his obsession with Shoto, Endeavor wouldn't just ignore a flaming prospect like Deku. Instead of training with Gran Torino, Deku would end up training with the flame hero aside Shoto even sooner. While he still planned on Shoto being his successor, he'd consider Deku to be a worthy sidekick for his son. At this point, Deku would mostly shoot fire from his mouth and cover his hands with it to be like All Might. And just like in the main timeline, he would eventually realize that he could fight with his legs too. He'd end up with something similar to Full Cowl thanks to emulating Endeavor's fiery envelopment. With proper training, he'd learn how to better regulate the temperature and intensity of his flames. Against All Might during the first term final exam, Deku and Bakugo would reveal some insanely devastating combination moves. Those years of synergy between them would be on full display. But speaking of All Might, without a quirkless fanboy to eat his hair, what would happen to One For All? Well, Mirio would have been chosen as the 9th user like they originally planned. But even that would not go according to plan. Gaining the power of One For All when you already have a quirk would only lead to premature death. Thankfully, Sir Night-Eye can see into the future, so hopefully he would be able to stop the transfer in time. To avoid the user dying early, they would need to find someone belonging to the quirkless 20% of the population. It just wouldn't be Deku. Then again, the main story only goes on for a bit over a year, so unless his life expectancy ends up being only a few months at best, the risk might still be worth it. When Mirio tries to flex on Class 1A, he might actually be challenged by Deku. Our fiery hero would not give Mirio any opening to exploit without harming himself in the process. He would stand out as something special. But knowing Mirio, he might just endure the pain to get the job done. Either way, he would be impressed enough to invite Deku to join him at Sir Night-Eye's agency. And since Deku wouldn't be All Might's successor, Sir Night-Eye would not be nearly as cold towards him. Deku would be able to fare pretty well against Overhaul in the beginning, but once the villain enters his full fusion form, without One For All, Deku wouldn't have the stopping power needed to put the monster down. It's more likely that he would be taking care of Eri. Before Overhaul super violated him with the quirk-destroying drug, Mirio was like a delivery boy, giving this man a sweet 30-piece combo meal. If you add the power of One For All to those hits, Overhaul's gonna look like a monster that's been punched by Saitama. Honestly, Sir Night-Eye would probably still be alive. That would definitely make things harder for All For One. Combining Hawks' intel on the League of Villains with Sir Night-Eye's predictions of heroic futures would make it much harder for the villains to operate. The likelihood of the first war happening at all would be pretty low. Even if the villains found a way to do it, a newly emerged Shigaraki would have to fight Dragon Fire Deku, a more developed Bakugo, Eraserhead, Gran Torino, Endeavor, and now, One for All Mirio. That is not a recipe for success. Regardless, Deku doesn't need One for All to win against the toughest villains the series has to offer. Bakugo simply developed his own quirk and managed to do what All Might couldn't: kill All for One. Obviously, it wasn't as simple as a totally one-on-one fight, and All for One went through hordes of heroes before then. But Bakugo was practically dead only a few minutes beforehand, so I think it's fair enough. By this point, there is no doubt that Deku's Dragon Fire would have undergone a quirk awakening, if not multiple, if Bakugos are anything to go by. His control over fire would be on a whole new level. We've seen plenty of fire quirks allow their users to fly. So of course, this version of Deku would have fiery dragon wings. Mimicking Endeavor's ultimate move, Prominence Burn, he might just surround himself with a lot of fire in the shape of a dragon and charge forward, causing total destruction. Even after losing an arm to one of All for One's tricks, Endeavor still pretty much killed him and forced the Demon Lord to activate his final trump card. He also did pretty well against Shigaraki, all things considered. So fire seems super effective. Instead of just shooting at them like a flamethrower, Deku would be able to actively keep his flames on the villains to combat their hyper regeneration. Decay also can't spread through fire, so Deku could actually go blow for blow with Shigaraki instead of playing the world's most intense game of tag. Deku would have never been able to see into the Vestige world and notice Shimura Tenko. So like most other heroes, his objective would be to get the job done and defeat the villain. He wouldn't need to hold back for the sake of saving a mass murderer with a skin condition. Between the deaths of Shigaraki, All for One, and the eventual end of Mirio, One for All and All for One would be gone forever. Deku and his friends may be able to create a new era of long-lasting peace like All Might, but without addressing the deeper issues of their society, it would only last so long. Over time, the Quirk Singularity Doomsday Theory would become more and more of an issue as quirks continue to become more and more complicated. More problems would eventually arise, but I guess that's what sequels are for. On that note, if you enjoyed the video and want more My Hero Academia What Ifs, let us know, along with any fun ideas you might have. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.